Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Carla Williams Scott, and I'm Director of the Department of Neighborhoods. Our department is new, but the areas that make up our department are not, one of which is the Community Relations Commission, which has been instrumental in working with the Jewish Federation on this program. I am honored to be with each of you here today for the 32nd Holocaust Remembrance. There are more than 230 Holocaust survivors living in the Columbus community, and it is important that we honor each of you and all of those that came before us for the sacrifices that were made. And I want you to know that we remember. And now I would like to present the Westland High School, ROTC, and the Jewish War Veterans to present the colors.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. Welcome to the 32nd Annual City of Columbus Holocaust Remembrance Program. My name is Debbie Sugarman, and I'm the chair of the Holocaust Education Committee at the Jewish Federation of Columbus, and I'll be serving as your Master of Ceremonies today. We are grateful to have the opportunity, under the auspices of Mayor Andrew J. Ginther, to gather together in the city of Columbus to observe this day of remembrance in honor of the memory of those who perished in the Holocaust. This program is sponsored by the City of Columbus, Mayor Andrew J. Ginther, and the City of Columbus Departments of Neighborhood in a cooperation with the Jewish Federation of Columbus and the Holocaust Education Committee. We would like to recognize a couple of other distinguished members of our community that are present. Zach Klein, Ellen Short representing Senator Sherrod Brown, Council members Shannon Hardin and Michael Stinziano, Mayor Ginther, Council President Pro Tem Priscilla Tyson, Jaza Page, Michael Stinziano, and Hugh Dorian, City Auditor. Thank you for continuing your support of attendance today. Thank you also to Carla Williams Scott, Director of Development of Neighborhoods, and to our Westland High School ROTC. In addition, I would like to recognize the Columbus chapter of the Jewish War Veterans, Saul Loeb, and everybody else who's in attendance today. We would also like to acknowledge Gordon Hecker, President and CEO of the Columbus Jewish Federation, and of course to the survivors who are here with us today. This Holocaust Remembrance program is in a large part about educating the next generation to be more tolerant people and to remain ever vigilant. We therefore recognize the students present today in City Hall, and we have more than ever, so thank you so much. And they represent a variety of schools from around Central Ohio. We have today with us students from Bexley High School, Dublin Kaufman High School, Hilliard Bradley, Davidson, and Darby High Schools, New Albany High School, and Tree of Life Christian School. And now it's my pleasure to call upon the Mayor of the City of Columbus, Andrew Ginther, to share with us a few words of welcome. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us here today, and to President Klein and to his colleagues on Columbus City Council, thanks for hosting us on this most important day of learning, of education, of remembrance, and commitment to a safer, more just world for all of us. We are so proud to continue this great partnership with the Community Relations Commission and all of our partners. We are so humbled to have Dr. Fenichel join us here today and to share his story. Today, we come together for this observance of Yom HaShoah, or Holocaust Remembrance Day. Today, as we mark this most solemn occasion, we also rededicate ourselves to this simple pledge: we must never forget. We must never forget man's inhumanity to man. We must never forget the scar this blatant act of violence has left on the Jewish people in Columbus and around the world. We must never forget the countless others persecuted by blind ignorance and hatred. It has been said that strength lies in differences, not in similarities. And that is certainly true right here in our great city of Columbus. Here in Columbus, we respect and celebrate our differences. Differences in thought and perspective. Differences in experiences and culture. Differences in gender and age. Here in Columbus, our differences make our community that much stronger. And we celebrate the respect for the differences in our community as a core city value. We promote equality and respect for differences here in Columbus, and we work to protect those who are the target of hatred and violence by creating the framework of a free and just society. This solemn occasion of Yom HaShoah is an opportunity for all of us, from all walks of life, to remember the lives of those who lost theirs, as well as those who were persecuted and survived during one of the world's darkest and most tragic times. And I know it might take a moment or two, because every year I speak directly to the students who have joined us. But if all of the survivors and their families are able, would you please stand? So this is the challenge I make to these amazing students from all over Central Ohio. Their story is our story. And so as you spend your time here today hearing more about one of the worst inhumanities in human history, your responsibility and job is to go back to your places of education and worship, where you gather and compete and play, to make sure that their stories are shared with your generation. We owe them so much. It's the least that we can do to honor their experience, their guiding light through darkness, and all the other millions of Jewish people wiped from the face of the earth. We say and honor you for all that you have done and continue to do in our community. Thank you. We'll be lifting up the stories of those who survived, since, as Dr. Fenichel, whom you'll hear from in just a few moments, we will amplify our collective ability to remember, to be kind and to take care of one another, and to have the courage to speak up and speak out when you see injustice. It is our job, devoted and rooted in the principles of this country and as citizens of the world, to use our voices to stand up for those who can't stand or speak for themselves. Thank you all for being here today, and thank you for your commitment to making sure we never, ever forget.
Thank you, Mayor Ginther, for your heartfelt and inspiring words and for your willingness to continue to support the significant annual Holocaust Remembrance program. The Holocaust raises many questions about humanity, life, and faith. We are here today to recall, memorialize, and bear witness. We recall the events that led to the Holocaust in order to learn from them. We remember those who lost their lives. We remember those who survived and have carried the experience of the Holocaust throughout their lives. We remember those who helped bring to an end to the Holocaust and those who liberated survivors. And we remember, lest we forget, and bear the consequences. The events and circumstances that led up to the Holocaust were both simple and complex. The rise of Nazi Germany after World War I set the stage. The first concentration camp, Dachau, was established in 1933 as a prison in a process to instill fear into the population and silence the political opposition. Boycotts of Jewish businesses began. Jews were barred from educational institutions, hospitals, professional employment, public parks, libraries, and beaches. Anti-Semitism grew until the Jews were stripped of their citizenship through the Reich citizenship laws. Then the infamous Nuremberg laws of the Third Reich in 1935 formally segregated Jews, barring intermarriage, household employment, and the display of national symbols by Jews. By 1938, Jews were being encouraged to leave Germany. They were prohibited from jobs, and their businesses were registered. The world was not completely unaware of these developments, but the response of the world was put to the test on Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, a government-sanctioned terrorist act through the night and early morning of November 9th and 10th of 1938. Hundreds of synagogues throughout Germany were destroyed. Jewish businesses were looted and destroyed, and tens of thousands of Jews and opponents of the Nazi regime were interned in concentration camps. Sadly, as Elie Wiesel stated, the world did not believe, and the world stood silent. Kristallnacht is viewed by many as the tipping point towards the implementation of Hitler's final solution, the genocide that was the Holocaust. Without significant response from the international community to Kristallnacht, the discrimination and destruction continued. The Holocaust was a systemic process from discrimination to isolation from society, the stripping of civil and human rights, and ultimately, genocide. The destruction of people does not occur overnight or without warning. Rather, it is a process that separates and demonizes its people until they are dehumanized. When the Nazis and their allies implemented the final solution, the Jews and other groups identified for extermination, such as homosexuals and gypsies, fit squarely into a category of other people that no longer had the right to live. We are here today to acknowledge that hatred is often contagious. When any group is discriminated against, it is usually just a matter of time until others are included. Jews in Europe gradually began to understand the goal and magnitude of what was happening, and organized resistance began. But in the end, nothing could bring back the 6 million Jewish lives that were lost, and 11+ million lives in total taken by the Nazi regime. Jewish life in Eastern Europe and Central Europe was all but decimated, and most of those who survived were forever changed. Only 3 years after the end of World War II, the General Assembly of the United States established a Universal Declaration of Human Rights. As atrocities have also continued in the aftermath of the Holocaust in Sudan, in Rwanda, in Kosovo, we are called to recall, memorialize, and bear witness to their stories, to learn from them, and to work to prevent the repetition of these atrocities. Collectively as a society, and each one of us as an individual, we bear the responsibility, and as stated by Elie Wiesel, to remain silent and indifferent is the greatest sin of all. Therefore, we are here today to remember and our presence here serves as testimony that we will not be silent. Please welcome Dr. Henry Fenichel. Henry was born in the Netherlands in 1938. Shortly after the Nazi rise to power, sensing the danger, Henry's parents sent a request for their relocation to Palestine, where his father's family resided. After Henry's father was deported and murdered by the Nazis in Auschwitz, Henry and his mother still had no response to their request to immigrate. They then went into hiding. When Henry was 4 years old, he and his mother's hiding place was discovered, and they were transported to the Westerbrook transit camp. Shortly after arriving, they learned of a prisoner exchange that would allow a select number of Jews to escape to Palestine. Through the miraculous series of events, Henry's mother was able to get them on a list for Transport 222. In June of 1944, Henry and his mother and 220 Dutch Jews, our individuals, left Bergen-Belsen concentration camp, eventually arriving to freedom in British Mandate Palestine. Upon arriving in Palestine, Henry was placed in a children's home. His mother remarried, and with the help of his stepfather's family, came to the U.S. in 1953. Henry taught physics at the University of Cincinnati for 38 years. He joins us today as part of the Cincinnati Center for Holocaust and Humanity Education's Speakers Bureau. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation to come here today. I have a medal, a medallion, a yellow star. When the Nazis invaded Holland, the Netherlands, they forced all Jews to wear these stars to ensure our separation from the rest of the community. As a child, I wore this with pride, unaware of the hatred and discrimination that this star represented. This star told the community rich children cannot go to regular public schools, rich families are banned from restaurant, theater, and public parks. If citizens were caught without these stars, we faced death, but with them on, we lost our freedom. We only had these stars to remind us that we were not alone in our struggle to survive. Now, despite the humiliation and the intolerance that we suffered because of this star, I still treasure mine. It traveled with me to Bergen-Belsen concentration camp, but I was not one of the 1.5 million Jewish children who perished in Nazi camps. I survived, as did this star. And I've kept it with me as my symbol of strength, and it continues to remind me of the importance of tolerance and accepting others who are different from us, and hope for a better future. I understand that last year your speaker was also a Dutch person or a child, Evelyn Marcus, a child of a Dutch survivors. And if you wish, this is a continuation of that story. For some reason, Dutch survivors seem to be represented. Specifically, I assume that most of you students, in fact, how many are familiar with the story of Anne Frank? I've read the diary of Anne Frank. Very good number of you. She has become the symbol, if you wish, of the travails of a child, a Jewish child during the Holocaust. And that's wonderful. But there were many, 1.5 million children with stories like that to tell who are no longer around. If you Google the number of people who perished during World War II, and be careful when you Google and you get the numbers, but if you do your homework, between 50 and 70 million people perished during World War II. That's if you include what happens in China, Southeast Asia, in Japan. Out of those, 23 million Soviet Union Russians, about 20 million from China. The numbers are mind-boggling. Out of those, 11 million perished in Nazi concentration camps, gas chambers, undesirables, homosexuals, gypsies, invalids, and among those, 6 million Jews. And out of those 6 million Jews, 1.5 million Jewish children. I like to think of myself as representing these Jewish children. So the point is, you didn't have to be Jewish to suffer in World War II. But what makes the Holocaust unique is that if you were born Jewish, you were destined to be burned in the gas chambers. That's the terrible difference. What is it about us as human beings that we do this to each other? You name your genocide of the week, Syria now or somewhere in Africa. If you read history books, whether it's biblical, the Bible, or it's always the chronicles of battles. This tribe fights that tribe, which is fighting that, or this country is invading that country. It talks about generals and kings. Rarely does it talk about how it affects individual citizens like you and me. Have our leaders consider what it does to folks like us, perhaps we wouldn't have these terrible things. Wishful thinking, I guess. Anyway, to promote the idea of what it does to individuals, I will tell you today the story of one individual, me and my family. My father, just like in the story of Anne Frank, the family grew in Germany, but when the Nazis came to power, they left and they went to Holland, the Netherlands. The name of the country is the Netherlands, by the way. Holland is one of the provinces which has Amsterdam in it, The Hague. I was born in The Hague, the capital, the Washington, D.C., and so on. So, but you should remember that the name is the Netherlands, but you could still call it Holland. Anyway, Nazis come to power in Germany. My father, who grew up in Berlin, the family decided it's time to leave. The family is his parents, mother and father, my grandparents, brother and sister who were in their 20s already, and he. And they decided to leave, and they went to Palestine, British control Palestine. My father said, you know what, you guys go. I want to see the world. I want to go, I'll stop in Holland. This is the mid-1930s, before the war. And then Belgium and France, and then I'll join you. Well, he goes to Holland, he meets this gorgeous woman, they fall in love, they get married, they move to a typical Dutch brownstone. A few years ago, my wife and I, who is sitting in the front row here, went back to check if the story that I'm telling really happened, and you wouldn't believe the records, the documentation that we found that they kept. So that's a picture of me down there. We lived on the second floor on the right side. Those days, we didn't have these little fancy toys that we carry nowadays, you know, taking selfies and pictures of each other. So we didn't have many pictures left. And furthermore, they didn't know from color either. But a few pictures survived, and that's one picture I found of me playing with my friends. I don't know if you can see where you're sitting all the way in the back, but I'm the cute one on the left side over there. And this is one, if not the only picture that I have of the family. I was the only child at that point, because soon thereafter, all hell broke loose. The Nazis invaded Holland, the Netherlands. People ask, why didn't you prevent? How did you allow them to wear the stars and take you? The point is that the Nazis, and I should distinguish between Nazis and Germans, because not all Germans were Nazis. Unfortunately, too many of them were bystanders, allowing the Nazis to do what they did. In any event, you can't read those details, but initially, when the Nazis invaded the country, they did nothing. They just took over running the place. So the cop on the street corner, instead of being a Dutch cop, was now a Nazi cop or a Dutch collaborator, and there were plenty of Dutch collaborators. And the language Dutch and German are close enough so that you can sort of communicate with each other. So for the first year, they just took over little things, running the government, running the city, no particular edicts against Jews until a year later. The invasion was May 1940, May 1941, first edict. First line that I highlighted there, Jews are not allowed to possess wireless. What's wireless? That's the internet of those days. Shortwave radio allows you to listen to the BBC, British Broadcasting Company, or the Voice of America, and learn what's really happening in the world. And step by step, these reductions come. Jews, then kids are not allowed to go to regular schools, you're not allowed to travel. Then at some point, you're told that you need to have a new ID paper. Okay, no big deal. So you see, each one of these restrictions was nothing by itself. You figure, well, it's a nuisance. Eventually, we'll get rid of these damn Nazis, and life will return to normal. So step by step, each one of them, you could more or less tolerate. Then one day they said, you need to renew your passport. Everybody has to carry a passport. In this country, driver's license is your ID. The rest of the world, you need a government-mandated passport. And if you happen to be Jewish, they stamp a J on it. Again, no big deal. We're not ashamed or embarrassed that we are Jews, just like in this country. But slowly but surely, it gets worse until you have to wear the Jewish star. This is, by the way, how you spell Jew in Dutch, Yod. The J is sort of like the Y. Then, one day, they announce they're rounding up Jewish men to go to labor camps. Even that could almost be acceptable, right? There's a war going on, the enemy invades you, they need uniform, they need tents, guns, what have you. So you take the enemy manpower, you put them as slave laborers in factories. But soon thereafter, they start rounding up not just men, women, children, babies, grandparents. If you haven't been suspicious, do you need those in labor camps? That's the point at which many went into hiding. And that's the point at which Anne Frank and her family went into hiding into a loft above a store they owned in Amsterdam, the commercial capital of the country. And my mother and I went into hiding into this location. This is in The Hague, not Amsterdam. And it was an infirmary. Upstairs at the first floor was sort of a child care center. So I would play with the kids during the daytime, and if some suspicious characters, Nazis or what have you, came around, my mother would be lying upstairs on the bed, feigning some kind of a sickness or what have you. And we were able to go like this for 6 months or a little more, but we too were captured. And among the documents that I found was a description, a little index cards for myself, as I was called Heinrich then, and Fenichel, and my mother and my father. And the date my father was captured, taken to Auschwitz, and the date they killed him. And so what is amazing about this, that me as a little kid, at that point I'm maybe 4 or 5 years old, they already identify me rather than the child of so-and-so as an individual. And again, you can't see the details in there, but the first address that's crossed out is where we lived, that brownstone picture I showed before. The second one, after that we went into hiding. You don't advertise where that is, so that isn't there. Then they captured us. We were in Amsterdam for a while, and then on the top right hand of that card, again, you can't see that, in 1943, we were taken to a camp called Westerbork. Westerbork was sort of a transit camp on the border of Holland and Germany. It was not a death camp. It was just, in fact, it was more like a ghetto. Big fence around, all the Jews were shoved in there, but internally the whole thing was run by a Jewish committee, made believe almost as if it's a livable place. There was a nursery school, there was kindergarten, there's food. In fact, the whole internal operation was by a Jewish committee. So life was manageable, except that Jewish committee, every Tuesday morning, they had to line up on the order of 1,000 people, between 900, 1,200, at the train station, loaded up on cattle cars, most of whom never came back. So clearly what you tried to do while you were in this Camp Westerbork, it's find a way to get out of these Tuesday morning shipments out east. So let me take a break of this and the miracle by which I survived. While all of this is going on in Palestine, in fact, starting in the 1860s, in southern Germany, there lived a group of Christians, fundamental Christians, who called themselves Templars. Not Templars after the Middle Age Knight Templars, but they believe that each one of us has the temple in ourselves. And so it's a society of temples, and they felt that it was very important for Christians to live in the Holy Land to speed up the return of the Messiah. So they would send emissaries, they would live there for a few years, they come back. After a while, they established a whole bunch of villages. And you know, it's a little peculiar. Remember, Palestine, Israel at the time was just like a big desert, nomads, camels and donkeys running around. So here come these Germans, and they implant little German villages where the trees are planted equidistant from each other. All the houses look like German houses in the village. And they live in this setting. I found in a history book, I found a picture. You can see they're all dressed with a suit and a tie, as opposed to a keffiyeh and shorts where it's hot, dedicating a particular school in there. And that was life. So here comes back, now jumping back to the 1930s. Nazis come to power in Germany. Here you have Germans, a few 100,000, living in British-controlled Palestine. British-controlled Palestine, how did that happen? So maybe it's important, considering what's happening today, to say a word or two about the Middle East. Before World War I, there were no countries in the Middle East. The whole Middle East was run by the Turks, the Ottoman Empire. After World War I, the British and the French took over the Middle East, they invaded, and they created countries: Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Jordan. So the mess we have in the Middle East now, these damn British didn't know how to draw borders. But that's a different lecture. Anyway, so here you have these German Templars living in Palestine. Many of the men, when the Nazis came to power in Germany, left and went back to Germany to fight for the cause. Why? But then you have Jewish friends, Arab friends. Why would you want to go fight with the Nazis? But presumably some of them were anti-Semites. The men that didn't go, the British rounded up, shipped them off to Australia, where they're still today, meaning there's a Templar colony in Melbourne, Australia. So here you have a bunch of women and children in British-controlled Palestine want to go back to Germany to join the husbands. Somebody in the Dutch Jewish leadership said, hey, don't let them go. You have Germans who want to go back to Germany from Palestine. Let's find people from Palestine in Germany who want to go back to Palestine. On a pretext of family reunifications, lists were created for an opportunity to change. And in fact, as I mentioned earlier, my father's family was already in Palestine. That got us on that list. And one day, while we're still in that camp in Holland, we got this Red Cross certificate that says that we have been placed on a list. That's the fall of 1943. Nothing happens for a few months. February 1st, 1944, Tuesday morning, my mother and I are called up and loaded on a cattle car heading to Bergen-Belsen. Again, you can't see the details, but I found a list of every Tuesday morning train that left Westerbork east. Auschwitz, Theresienstadt, Bergen-Belsen. The arrow points on the one that I was on. Anne Frank was on one of the last ones on that exchange. Okay, well, Bergen-Belsen was no picnic. You have seen plenty of pictures on it, so I don't need to go into details. It's a pretty rough place. Although I must say, originally, Bergen-Belsen was not meant to be a place with concentration camp where you have gas chambers and burn and kill people. And initially, it was meant to be a camp where they would put captured Allied soldiers and use them to trade for German soldiers who were captured by the Allies. But as the war progressed and they needed more space, they dumped more and more people in there until this is a picture of Bergen-Belsen when it was freed by the British, May 1945, shoes of people who didn't make it. Anne Frank's shoes is among that pile also. Anyway, so continuing back with my story, so here we are in Bergen-Belsen, and on June, after about being there for a few months, on June 30th, 1944, we are called up on the daily roll call, 222 Dutch Jews, mostly older people, hardly any men between 14 and 45, and a couple of kids, and my mother and I among those 222, loaded on a train, a proper train that took us to Palestine. It was a 10-day trip. Again, you can't see the details of the map, but Bergen-Belsen is on the north near Hanover, Germany, and the line goes all the way down. The actual exchange took place on the Bosphorus in Turkey, one ferry taking us east, the other taking the Templars west, and we went down Syria, down Lebanon, into Palestine. What I think is interesting about that map is the people who are escaping Syria right now taking that same route in the other direction. So we come to the Holy Land, and I'm furious with my mother. She promised me we'll never be in another camp again, and what do the British do? They put us in a camp. But of course, that was not a Nazi camp. That was a camp to be there for a few days, check our health, give us injections, and connect us with the rest of the family. And of course, we need to have a new ID paper. That's very important as you travel the world. So this is it's written in English because the British run Palestine, and it says in English, first line, Government of Palestine, and Arabic and Hebrew, run right to left. Department of Migration. This is to certify that Fenichel, Paula, and son Heinrich are now residents of Palestine. For the grown-ups over here, you see I'm actually a Palestinian, but that's a different lecture too. Actually, in terms of the issue, what's going on in Israel right now, I believe there should be a Palestinian state. So. That's a different topic. Anyway, the social workers and their wisdom separate my mother and me. They sent, because my mother was not in great shape, that picture that you couldn't see detail, I didn't look so bad. They sent me to a children's home in a village, now a city, called Nahariya on the Mediterranean coast on the northern part of the city, of the country, and my mother went to live with my father's sister. Remember, my father's family was already there, who was married, had a bunch of kids, and she would, you know, the children's home was not a prison, but there were some people, dysfunctional families, what have you. We went to the local village school, and that was our dormitory, so to speak. My mother would come and visit me occasionally. Certainly all the holidays we celebrated, I would be spending time with her. That lasted another 4 years. Comes May 1948. I'm 10 years old. The State of Israel is established. Another war. I remember that war a little bit better. That was Piper Cups dropping hand grenades rather than Scud's missile. But we, in the home in Nahariya, we were isolated. I think it's important, because of the daily news about Palestine and Israel, to give a little bit of background what happened then. When the Jews came to Palestine early, starting 1900, what have you, they did not want to have a separate country. The hope was going to be a one country. Jews, Christians, and Arabs would live there. By the way, most of the Arabs in Israel and Palestine are not Muslims. They're Christians. They're Christians who live in the Holy Land, and they speak Arabic. That's the language that you speak. So we have to be careful in using terminology. In any case, the United Nations decided, you know what, let's divide the country up. Let's give the Jews the area where they live, the blue stuff in there, and let's give the Palestinians the green and the pink stuff. And for all I know, the Palestinians accepted that, but the neighbors didn't. Iraq, Iran, Syria, Jordan invaded the country, drive the Jews to the sea. Well, it didn't work for them. They lost. Not only did they lose, they lost all that pink stuff. So what they got left with is the green part called the West Bank, and on the bottom left, Gaza. The West Bank for the next 20 years was run by Jordan. They never gave them independence. Gaza was run by Egypt. They never gave them independence. Then 1967, another war, and life is getting complicated. But the point is, we need to know that introduction when we discuss today's issues over there. Okay, well, let me move on to my story. After the war, the town that I was in, this Nahariya, was surrounded by Arab villages. We were under siege. The Israeli army came in. My mother was on a first command car, took me back, took a bus back to the city, and she tells me she got married. Okay, so now I live in this fancy-looking house in the Tel Aviv area, but life was rough. This is the beginning of the establishment of the state, and my stepfather had 2 brothers in the United States. And they said, you know what? Life is rough in Israel. Why don't you come over here? Over here, the sidewalks are paved with gold. Hey, how do you resist sidewalks paved with gold? So, by the way, the sidewalks are paved with gold, but you have to break your back to pick up the gold. But the opportunities in this country are incredible. You know, I turned out okay. Anyway, so we come to the United States, and I should bring this to some conclusion. What did I do with my... Huh? And so anyway, we decided we'll come to the United States. So we hop on a boat by the name of Andrea Doria. This was her maiden voyage. She represented the rebirth of the Italian merchant marine. I see some smiles in here. Yes, 2 years later, she sank like the Titanic. My wife says that a cat has 9 lives, so I still have a few more to go. So we come into the New York Harbor, Statue of Liberty on the left, skyscrapers on the right, and on a small black and white TV, President Eisenhower, black, they didn't know from color those days, gives his inaugural speech, January 1953. And from then on, once we got in, we moved, we got an apartment in Brooklyn. Brooklyn, that's part of the country, right? Yeah. Brooklyn is a Dutch name. Anyway, I went to high school there, to college, all free. Then I went across the river to Rutgers University and got myself a PhD in physics, got a job offer from the University of Cincinnati. I thought, that I would be there for a few years and then move on to some other job. But we discovered Cincinnati and Ohio was a well-kept secret, a wonderful place to raise a family and so forth. And so we stayed. So although my story, I started as a rough start, there's a happy ending. And when I speak to local schools in the Cincinnati, Kentucky, Indiana area, I'm frequently try to conclude, so what did we learn? And what's the message that you should walk away with? And that's the third paragraph on the third page of the program that you have. That's a poem by Niemöller, and you can read it on your own. The message, though, is don't be a bystander. Be an upstander. You see something terrible happening, stop it. School level, bullying or what have you, adults and later in life, try and prevent another Holocaust. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Fenichel, for sharing your remarkable story. The experiences of the Holocaust and of those who survived Nazi persecution are in danger of becoming distant memories, and ones that can too easily be set apart from our daily lives. We are privileged to bear witness to your story today and to honor the memory of your family. Thank you. To honor the memory of the 6 million Jews that were murdered by Nazis during the Holocaust, Rabbi Michael Unger, Senior Rabbi at Congregation Tifereth Israel, will present 6 survivors to light candles. We welcome family members to join the survivors as they light candles if they wish. In addition to the 6 million Jews who were murdered in the Holocaust, there were also 5 million other individuals murdered by the Nazis, including trade unionists, people with disabilities, the LGBTQ community, gypsies, and Christians. There were also non-Jews who, despite the grave risks to their own life, were willing to shelter Jews being hunted by the Nazis. Rabbi Unger will present 5 representatives to light candles in memory of the 5 million individuals that were murdered during the Holocaust. We begin our candle lighting ceremony with the song Eli, Eli, written by Hannah Senesh and performed by Paula Stein. Hannah Senesh was a young woman from Hungary who moved to Israel and then volunteered to return to Europe to save Jewish lives. She parachuted into Yugoslavia, went to Hungary, and then was discovered by the Nazis and executed. She was known for her heroism and her poetry.
העולם, החול והים, רשרוש של המים, פרק השמיים, תפילת האדם, החול והים, רשרוש של המים, פרק השמיים, תפילת האדם.
This brings us now to the candle lighting ceremony. To light the first candle, I call upon Mr. Yefim Fishman. I call on Mrs. Sophia Sandler to light the second candle. Fran Greenberg. I call on Mr. Irv Shamus to light the third candle. I call on Mr. Albert Drobiz to light the fourth candle. I call on Mrs. Galina Deshevsky to light the fifth candle. I call on Mrs. Sofia Karpovich to light the sixth candle. And now representing the other communities affected by the Holocaust, I call on Deborah Peterman and Richard Wagner to light the first candle. I call upon Council Member Shannon Hardin to light the second candle. I call upon Dorsey Hagar to light the third candle. I call upon Saulab of Jewish War Veterans to light the fourth candle. I call upon Johnny Oak to light the fifth candle. I call upon the Reverend Skip Cornett to light the final candle. And then we'll call on Reverend Cornett for a reading.
So let us follow the suggestion of our speaker that we read this passage attributed to Reverend Martin Niemöller, Lutheran clergy who served a congregation in Berlin during the war and ended up in Dachau himself, was arrested by the Nazis, taken out of his church. So let's open up your bulletin to that, and let's all read it together, as he suggested. It's called First They Came. It's toward the bottom of the page, and we will do it together. First they came. First they came for the communist. I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the socialist, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionist, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. Thank you.
I now call upon Rabbi Unger to chant El Maleh Rachamim, the memorial prayer.
This is a special El Maleh Rachamim, which is recited in memory of those murdered in the Holocaust. Traditionally, we rise for this prayer, so those who are able to stand, I ask you to please rise at this time. I'll first chant the prayer in Hebrew and then in English translation. El Maleh Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Hamsei Menucha Nechona, Tachat kanfei השכינה, במעלות קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר רקיע מזהירים. לנשמות כל אחינו בני ישראל, שנטבחו בשואה, אנשים, נשים וטף, שנחנקו ושנשרפו ושנהרגו. Began Eden tehe menuchatam, Ana bal harachamim, Hastirem beseter kenafecha leolamim, Utzror bitzror chaim et nishmotehem, Adonai hu nachalatam, V'yanuchu v'shalom al mishkevotehem. V'nomar Amen. Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure, to the souls of all those who perished in the Shoah, in the Holocaust, men, women, and children of the House of Israel and other communities that were targeted, who were slaughtered and suffocated and burned to ashes. May their memories endure and inspire deeds of charity and goodness in our own lives. May their souls thus be bound up in the bond of life. May they rest in peace. And let us all say, Amen. You may be seated.
Thank you, Rabbi Unger, Reverend Cornett, to our candlelighters, and to Paula Stein. We would also like to offer our sincere thanks to those who have provided support and contributed to help make this program possible, including Nelson Hewitt of the Columbus Department of Neighborhoods, Bob Lane and Justin Shaw of the Jewish Federation, Judge Eric Brown, Judge Rita Epler, Debbie Ecker, Sandy Hackman, and Sam Nahem of the Jewish Federation's Holocaust Education Committee. Thank you to Kroger for providing the flowers that we'll take to the sculpture today. Mary King for helping us with our survivors today. And thanks to all the schools, teachers, and administrators who continue to educate about the Holocaust and help facilitate the students' participation today. We can never take for granted the moral compass of our society. We must strive personally, as a city and a nation, never to lose this moral compass. The experience of the Holocaust teaches us that we must continually be vigilant in this regard. It is particularly fitting in today's world to reflect on the potential for each of us to make a difference. Thank you for being here for today's program. We hope you'll join us as we walk across the street to the sculpture entitled Freedom, created by local artist and survivor Alfred Tibor, who we unfortunately lost this past month. Mrs. Susan Tibor will lead us to the sculpture today. Columbus Fire Battalion Chief Michael Videra will join us in playing taps. Thank you again for your participation. Thank you to the Columbus Police Department for assisting us in our walk. Have a good day. Thank you.